What happens when you finally build the business you dreamed of, grow it, sell it, and then discover that freedom doesn't feel quite the way you expected? Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. My guest today is Alane Boyd. She's a serial entrepreneur, growth strategist, keynote speaker, AI and automation expert, and co-founder and CEO of Biggest Goal. She's built and led multiple software-as-a-service companies, grown a tech company into an 8-figure business, and successfully exited 2 companies. On paper, that sounds like an entrepreneurial dream, but as we'll talk about today, the dream has a second side. After one of those exits, Alane experienced the silence that can come after years of consistent motion. The business was gone. Her identity, tied to the business, had changed, and the next chapter wasn't immediately obvious. Alane now helps business owners tackle their biggest operational challenges through systems, automation, AI, and workflow design. She also co-hosts the podcast Automate Your Agency, where she and Micah Johnson help founders systemize and automate their businesses so they can scale more efficiently without being trapped in the day-to-day grind. So today, as usual, we'll break this conversation into 2 segments. In the first segment, we'll talk about Alane's entrepreneurial journey, the wins, the stress, the burnout, the exits, and what success really felt like once she got there. In the second segment, we'll shift into her area of expertise, AI, automation, workflow design, and how entrepreneurs can build companies that don't depend on them being in the middle of every task, every decision, and every emergency. And it all begins right now. Stick around. Hi, Alane. Welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you on the show today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too, Mike. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So let's go back in the Wayback Machine, in our time machine for a little bit.
Okay.
You've built and exited companies, but I'd love, before we get into that degree of success, how did you first become an entrepreneur? And what was something that, was it something that intentionally happened, or was it were you a pinball in a pinball machine bouncing off the bumpers and there you were?
One thing I have learned being an entrepreneur and meeting other entrepreneurs is there is no single path to how you became an entrepreneur. So I can see all sides, like you just said. But I think it was just ingrained in me at a young age. I mean, I remember, being in my teens and people would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm like, I want to be a CEO and wear cute outfits. Like that was the goal. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned an insurance agency. He was an independent agent. And I just loved his lifestyle. He was at every sporting event. He was the smartest one, I would say, because he did not overwork himself by any means. And so I just thought, man, that is the life that I want to have. I don't want to run his company. I want to figure out what I want to do. And so I think I started my first company when I was like 24 or 25. Like I was fresh out of college. I got a business and entrepreneurship bachelor's degree. And, you learn nothing about running a business, getting a business degree. But
it's an irony, was just the path
that it was so funny. I'm like, wow, what you learn, how you learn to be an entrepreneur is by being an entrepreneur and all of those hard lessons you've got to learn. But that was my journey.
Yeah, I think, entrepreneur is a funny word because you can be an entrepreneur and not very entrepreneurial. And I think the most successful entrepreneurs are ones that have always been entrepreneurial. And then the opposite is true. You can be entrepreneurial and work a 9 to 5, not being an actual entrepreneur. When I hire people in my business, I look for entrepreneurial people. I look for people who think outside the box. And entrepreneurial people, ironically, don't last long in jobs. Like I could never go back to, a 9 to 5 because I'd be fired in the first day or 2 or maybe 3 minutes because we tend to be bulls in china shops. We tend to be very obsessed by the shiny object in the corner. We tend to not follow rules. We definitely don't do stupid, right? We just have no time for that, right? So sometimes like we end up in our own business because we're just too frustrated working for someone else. But so there's a risk in hiring entrepreneurial people because they might think too far out of your box. But I don't
Right.
know. But definitely, it sounds like you were entrepreneurial, and then made the transition to actually be an entrepreneur. Your website says that you grew your first tech company into an 8-figure enterprise. That's a lot of zeros. When you were in the middle of building the company, did it feel like success or did it mostly feel like pressure?
It had its highs and lows, really. There was a point in time where I was really struggling to let go as we grew. And I had a lot of fear about, well, if I let go of these large contracts, would we lose them? Because everybody says, like, it's not personal, it's business. Well, when you're an entrepreneur, everything is personal to you because that is money going out of the bank account. And so, I had a really hard time. So those days were rough on me in the business because we were growing, but I couldn't let go. And so I was working a lot and under a lot of stress that I was putting on myself. And then we got to a point where my business partner was like, you have got to let go, hire whoever it is, but you are not the only person in this world that can do what you do. And I was so angry, but he was so right. And I started on the path of what that looked like for me so I could start letting go of some stuff. And then I would say I did hit a really good sweet spot in the business. And then of course at any point in business things can change, and that's when we decided to go through a merger shortly after that. We grew the company past that, and then we went through an exit that the entire merged company got bought out. So, there's a lot of hardship in all of it, but man, I am just so grateful, even though it was so hard and stress, anxiety, and learning pains, like so many things. But I look back and I'm like, I made it through that. I've learned so many things, and this business is so much better because of those hardships.
You had to go through several transformations. One, you had to learn to let go, which I can
Mm-hmm.
attest is the hardest thing of entrepreneurship
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
letting go, delegating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because in the early days, like in my company in the early days, I couldn't afford anybody. I started my company, I bootstrapped my company, started it in my garage, and
Mm-hmm.
did everything myself. I was the chief cook and bottle
Mm-hmm.
washer. I did the one thing I loved and the 9 things I hated because there was no one else.
Yeah.
And then eventually, when I started getting bodies in there, I couldn't afford good talent. So it was just like, hey, the prerequisite to be one of my employees would be a pulse and a willingness to accept a low number, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but and then I just got used to that, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was we were so busy, I didn't have time to stop and train or write an
Mm-hmm.
SOP or document anything that it's like I desperately needed that, but I didn't have time to do it, and it was a vicious cycle, right? Because I
Yeah.
didn't do it, that perpetuated the I don't have time to do it, situation. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult to break the cycle, and I think it's not just like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just going to let go tomorrow. You actually have to break a cycle, which is
Yeah.
really hard for humans to do. It turns out, particularly this human right here. The
It
other
is. It
thing
was
that
it
was,
was easier.
huh? No, sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna say it was easier to let go of the things I didn't like doing because I was so excited to offload those things. And
Yeah.
so we really got into a good rhythm of I'm so ready to get rid of this, but it was the bigger things or the things that I enjoyed that was why I liked being an entrepreneur. I got to do the things that I liked doing. But you can't grow multi-million dollar companies by doing the little things that you enjoy doing. You got to do the big things you enjoy doing.
Yeah, it turns out a lot of the things I enjoyed doing really didn't make us any money, but I loved doing it. You know, I love tweaking the website. I love creating. I love, designing stuff. But at some point, now we need transactions, folks. We need commerce, right? We need to
Mhm.
actually build something and actually ship something and actually service something, and we have to do all that. We're an equipment manufacturer, so we actually have to get down to business. We can't just do the fun stuff. But I remember in the earliest days, I was so caught up in this is back in the 90s. So, this is before the internet. So I was designing the stationery back when businesses actually wrote letters. I was designing business cards. I eventually started designing the website. I love that. But business, the actual, like the stuff that makes money, that was less fun. That was more work. And, so I had to check myself and go, okay, Mike, yeah, this is fun, but is it going to cover payroll next Thursday? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Can't focus on that right now.
Got to focus on payroll, right? We don't have time to work on the important because we're so busy working on the urgent. That type of philosophy, going from fire to fire. So you went through two what are difficult transitions. One is letting go, which you've talked about, and the other was a merger. How was that? I mean, a merger is two different companies coming together, two different perhaps cultures coming together, two different groups of people in many cases coming together. Was that smooth, or did the culture morph into a new blended culture, or did one company have an influence on the other?
Yeah, it was hard. And, on paper things make sense, but in culture they don't. So you really nailed it on the culture piece. And that was the hardest part. And we were so systemized for a social media reputation agency. We had every SOP documented, every process, every workflow. We had automation built in. And our philosophy was it's not that we want more out of our employees. We want them to get done and at the end of their day and leave work, because we all need time off. Like, we can't expect everybody to want to work 12 hours and a day and still be good the next day. You have to have this time away. So that was our philosophy, is building these systems so that people could get done with work. They could go on vacation and not get interrupted. And the other company we merged with did not have that same philosophy. And they just really ran people into the ground. And so what I learned in that experience was paying attention to how long employees stay, looking at turnover, and really seeing that as one of the metrics. Now, that doesn't tell everything, but if you have a 6-month turnover in most positions, then hey, there's a problem here. But that was really tough. It eventually got better. The other company was much better at selling. We were much better at operations. That's why on paper it looked so good. And they did want to take our systems and our processes and implement them into the bigger company. And so it took some time. There was a lot of turnover at that time because the communication just wasn't strong enough. And that was our first time going through that experience, and we're learning as we go. And so I would say it was not smooth. It eventually worked out. Enough people left and new people came in that we just started over.
Yeah. There's one of the other sidekicks of this show. This is called The Reluctant Entrepreneur. I have another one called Reluctant Lessons, where businesses go wrong. And it profiles, historic, epic business failures. And one of the ones I'm working on right now is on Boeing. And Boeing, historically, has been one of the most respected companies in the world. And if you're a commercial aviation pilot, there was a saying back in the day that if it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. Their products were so well respected in the aviation community. They were safety first and profit second. And they did very well. So well that they merged with McDonnell Douglas. They bought McDonnell Douglas, and which was the manufacturer of the infamous DC-10, MD-11, MD-90, DC-9. They were, the DC-3. They were a legacy manufacturer, and fairly respected, not like Boeing. So Boeing bought them, and what happened was, instead of a blending of the culture, Boeing adopted the McDonnell Douglas culture, which was shareholder centric, and everything for the shareholders, and that crept into Boeing's culture, and Boeing, according to all reports, stopped putting the same emphasis on quality and, aviation excellence, and started saying, hey, our shareholders need dividends. Our shareholders need rising stock prices. They started running what is normally a very long-term strategic business into a quarter by quarter business. How can we boost profits for the next earnings report? All that. And that allegedly is what led to some pretty high profile, very public, disastrous consequences that frankly killed, 700 or 800 people, these airplanes that were crashing because they shortchanged their engineering and fooled the regulators and put planes in the sky, brand new planes in the sky that were not safe. And they lost the trust of pilots. And that's a generational problem. You don't just go, okay, well, now we trust you again. Those pilots will go to their graves not trusting Boeing. Where if their fathers were pilots, their fathers swore by Boeing. Now the new people swear at Boeing. And that's a problem. People think when you merge, you become a slightly different flavor of soup. Instead, you become a salad bowl where everything is in the bowl, but none of it is homogenized, right? None of it is blended. And so that can be problematic. Anyway, I tend to go down rabbit holes.
Yeah, I liked it, and I could you going through that experience, I could see, and we did the merger knowing that we wanted to sell. So just like shareholders are making decisions to create more profit in the business, as a merged company, you're looking for those wins because you merge so that you have one accounting department. You have these duplicate efforts now into one. And so, I learned a lot from it, but it was, just difficult. And those things that you're doing are people that you're changing their lives too, just, with the example like Boeing. So I thought that was a really good example on a big, much, much larger scale.
A lot of entrepreneurs dream about selling their company someday. That's their exit strategy. It may not be like a active, proactive strategy, but that's their what's your exit strategy? Oh, someday I'll sell it. You had that someday more than once. What surprised you most about life after exit that you did not expect?
Oh, the loneliness. Oh my gosh, that first time, gosh, it's everything. We're all so addicted to technology that we don't realize when nobody is emailing us, no one is texting us. Your friends, it's not that your friends don't want to talk to you, but they're working. There's not a lot of 34-year-olds that just sold a company and have nothing else going on that day, right? So there was the technology addiction. I can remember the loops that I used to go in between my email, my project management system, and Slack, and none of that was going off anymore. And so that is also something that I had to work through. Plus, not being around the community that I had been building for 11 years. That employees, clients, connections, and partners in the industry. Like when I sold, I didn't want to be in that industry anymore. So that part of my life also stopped. So it was like trying to refigure out what I was going to do with it.
I would imagine it could kind of be a loss of purpose, right?
Oh, that's exactly how I explain it normally. Yeah. I had I had no purpose. And man, that is not a good way to live.
Well, you were on the EO Nashville podcast and you were talking about the post-exit experience involving isolation and even depression. What do you think entrepreneurs misunderstand about the emotional side of selling a business? I mean, you didn't expect that, right? That just
I didn't.
hit you,
I
right?
always I always say like, man, I'm just going to be drinking mojitos at the beach all day, and
There you go.
was not expecting this depression that set in and not having something to look forward to work wise, where I really like doing things. And, in our culture now, we don't have to do a whole lot. Some of us don't even have hobbies anymore. And so our time really is focused around work and then everything else that we need to get done when we're not working. So that purpose in life outside of work doesn't really exist. And so I was very, very surprised by it and had to really, I did sleep a lot though, because I was very exhausted from that experience. So outside of getting a lot of sleep and healing myself, I really had to start working on what could a future look like where I work, but not overdo it again and have some joy and relax and not, I think that's the gift that selling your company does give you, is that you're you don't have to worry about money, or you don't have to worry about money as much. Then how do I really want to spend my time becomes the biggest resource in your life, or how you get to decide how you spend your time.
Yeah, and you don't fall into the same traps. You don't make the same fear-based decisions.
Hmm.
You look at things through a different lens, once you've been through it once. Even if the exit was not profitable, I think
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think going through that journey, coming out the
Hmm.
other end, you come out different, and you do it again differently. And
Yeah.
you embrace what you loved about it, and what to avoid, right? I'm not going to
Yeah.
go down that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to commit to that project because I remember last time, right?
Yeah.
So on your public speaking, but you do a lot of public speaking, and on your public speaking page, you mention late nights, costly mistakes, burnout, and even stress-induced autoimmune diagnosis. It's
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
People work themselves, the saying is work yourself to death. And that's
Hmm.
probably not literal, but I get the point. It does
Yeah.
weaken everything about you. Looking back, were there warning signs that you ignored because you were so focused on growth or something else?
Oh yeah, my biggest warning sign, and even now it's an early warning sign that I can notice, is my migraines start coming back. And so I know if I start getting migraines, then I'm pushing myself too hard. I'm putting myself under too much stress, and I can start working backwards from there. Instead of, because I've been in remission with I have not had an angioedema episode, which that's the autoimmune disease that I have. I have not had an episode since 2020. So as long as I recognize, hey, that's the first one, and then it's a weird second one. If I ignore my migraines, the underneath my chin here starts itching like I've got fire ants. And so that's my next sign. So if I start noticing that my skin is itching right there, I'm like, okay, this is serious. I'm not paying attention to my health. I've got to take care of myself.
Your body has a strange way of warning you, right? It can't
Yep.
talk, but it can certainly communicate, and
Yes.
and it does it that way. You've had multiple entrepreneurial chapters in your background, which is very impressive. What did you carry forward from your first company, and what did you intentionally leave behind?
One of them that it took me a few times to learn, I'll say it took me 3 times, my first company and 2 other companies that I started and then just closed, that I didn't pursue further, is that I don't want a business that I have to be in person for. I like running a tech-ish type company that I can work from anywhere, that I can be in San Diego or Portugal or wherever, and that way I can still adventure and explore. But man, an in-person business, I had a retail shop at one point and I was like, why did I not pay attention to this feeling? Then I had a burger company at one point. I'm like, I just did this to myself again. I cannot do this. The stress in having those situations and having an in-person type business, that doesn't mean I never travel to see clients, but I don't need to be every day in the same location and make sure the doors get opened if an employee calls out that day.
You're the first guest I've had. This is the 102nd episode. You're the first guest I've had that I can honestly say has gone from burgers to artificial intelligence. That's
I'll take it.
quite a journey. But it sounds like one thing you learned, which is very difficult for entrepreneurs to learn this and to actually do it, and that is the concept of fail fast. You mentioned
Mhm.
you started a business and you went, nope, let go of that, right? A lot of humans, I think it's human nature, once you start something that was exciting enough to get you to start it,
Yeah.
we tend to ignore the I refer a lot metaphorically to the business gods. The business gods send out very cryptic messages to you. Sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're subtle. But I tend to ignore all those things. And then the business gods turn up the heat and eventually they hit you in the face with a 2x4. And then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, you were talking to me. Okay, now it makes sense. What was when you decided, nope, not for me? Did you just like cut bait and run, and have you had any regrets over that decision? Do you ever think one day like I should have just stayed? I should have just done it or
Oh, yeah.
something.
No, I mean, I don't regret closing any of them. Some of them, I would say 2 out of the 3, I did try to pivot and just do some form of online e-commerce with. But I will say once I moved it to that, my passion for building it had already left. So I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to leave this up. And if something happens, great, but I don't have to spend time on it.
Yeah.
And I think, and I never thought about it the way that you just said it. And there is so much value. And hopefully now I've learned my lesson. Like, Alane, do not start another business that involves you being somewhere locally in person. You need to let go. But, failing fast, those businesses were less than a year.
Yeah.
I just, if it wasn't working out, and there's a word for it too, Mike. And I was thinking of the airline example that you gave. What was whenever you could go from here to the UK on a super fast airplane, like it was
Oh, the
just a few
Concorde.
hours? Concorde. That is an example of it and there's a word for it. I can't think of it, but they knew for years that was not making any money. But you get attached to it because, well, we've already invested this much money into it.
And it
We
was
need to see if
status.
we can make
It
our
was
money
status
back.
for the airline that only 2 airlines in the entire world operated that plane, Air France and British Airways. And no one wanted to cut it
Yeah.
because they didn't want British Airways didn't want Air France to have that super luxury for the rich plane and vice versa. So it was ego, it was stature.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and I got to fly that. I actually flew from New
Did you
York.
really?
When British Airways announced they were getting rid of it, Air France already did. They I'm an aviation buff. I'm a pilot. I don't fly anymore, but I'm a licensed pilot. And my goal, I mean, some kids want to be an astronaut. I wanted to fly Concorde. And I wanted to experience what it was like to go twice the speed of sound. And there's 3 ways to do that. I could join the Navy and become a pilot. Nope. I could join the Air Force and become a pilot. Nope. Or I could spend $5,000, which is really all it was for me, and do it that way, which is what I did. British Airways had a sale. They said, okay, in 6 months, we're ditching Concorde. Let's just sell a bunch of tickets. So it was $5,000 for a one-way ticket on Concorde from New York to London. And then they flew you back first class on a 747. And so
Oh,
I did a
wow.
joyride. I literally went to London, came back. And that was the biggest thrill ride I've ever had. I mean, I'm
That's
sitting in
so
the
cool.
plane. I'm traveling at 1,350 miles an hour, twice the speed of sound. I'm sitting in a window seat, seeing the curvature of the Earth at 58,000 feet, and it was absolutely amazing. It was like a stamp in my passport, but
Yeah.
literally and figuratively. But yeah, I get your point. Yeah, it's no one wants to let it go. So it's they're
Mhm.
all like peacocks with their feathers out. They're just no one wants to be the first to put them away.
Yep. Yep.
Today, a lot of entrepreneurs hear AI, artificial intelligence, and either get excited or overwhelmed or frightened. Right, all of it. From your perspective, where should a business start in their strategy to embrace AI?
Definitely the start would be figuring out, I call them AICs, AI champions in your organization. Just get a small group of you, maybe 3, maybe 5 or 6. Even if you're a huge corporation, like get somebody, a group of people to start testing it out and don't work in silos. I always say, get your AICs together and start testing out the use cases. There is so much training needed on the nuance of how your organization is going to use AI Are you going to allow for something like CoWork or Codex and work off of a local file system on your computer? Okay, if you're going to do that, then you have to train your team. But before you do that, you need to figure out what connectors you're going to use. Like there's so much when we start expanding past just AI chat. That's base level now. Every company is pretty much dabbling into some kind of chat, but really start digging into what could be automated and use those AICs for those use cases, learning how you want your organization to use it, and before you roll it out to the whole company. Because
Yeah.
I see so many disasters. I saw one of our companies that we were working with, and we always say, do not roll it out to everybody. Let's just start here. And they didn't listen. And they got banned within 24 hours. They got their account shut down. So with the AI company. So, really focusing on training instead of just letting people go. I see that really often too. Is like, oh, we're going to use AI today. You all get licenses, but zero training is happening. And so you have very different levels, yet people not wanting to let go and don't trust AI. And it's because they're not giving it the right context. It's like hiring an intern and telling on the first day, go, okay, well, go do your work. And they're
Go do
like,
something. Yeah, right.
yeah, I'll go do something, but I might not be the right thing. So, you got to really treat AI like your intern and work with it and give it context and have it work from your file system, if that's ShareFile or Dropbox or Google Drive, whatever it might be. But really start digging in and with a small group before you just give it the reins to everybody.
Yeah, many years ago, I learned to write code, and which became helpful when I was designing the equipment that we were building at the time. And there's a common phrase, and it can be applied to more than just software coding, but garbage in, garbage out. And AI relies on prompts. And I'll tell you, I'll use this platform today, and maybe you can back me up. Please, people who are businesses in particular that are using AI for the first time, stop posting those stupid LinkedIn posts filled with emojis and M dashes. I mean, write me a post on why people should buy from me. Okay. And then they just copy and paste it. It's obvious. It's cringeworthy. It's like, okay,
Oh, God,
I
they're
use
so
AI
bad.
daily. I use AI to help research you because it's faster than me going to every single Google link and all that. But I put guardrails on it. I insist that everything it does have citations, and I got to have links, and occasionally I check them. And because AI is so trained by its originators to please because they want you coming back. So, I've even told it, quit saying things like, "What a great question, Mike," or "That's insightful." I'm like, okay, I pay $20 a month for Chat GPT. I don't need the accolades. Just and it does learn your personality. It does learn your voice quite well. I mean, amazingly well. But I think a lot of businesses think that's what it does. It can write an email or it can write a post. It can do so much more than that. But they're just looking at surface level, as you mentioned earlier. It's almost like a new video game. They're just playing with it. And it's quite happy to just give you garbage stuff, because that's kind of the default before you train it to, I tell it absolutely no emojis, no M dashes, write as if a human is talking. So use a lot of contractions. Don't formalize stuff. This is not to be read like a book. This is to be, a script or whatever the case may be. And then I go and change it all. I use it as a draft, and then
Yeah, exactly.
but it's a great first draft. It's a wonderful first draft, wonderful second draft, wonderful edit check. It does so many good things, but you're using it well beyond that. You're actually setting up automations and things like that. What are some examples of some automations that businesses could turn over to an AI agent or some type of platform?
Yeah. My favorite one is, so we name all of our AI agents. They get a human name because they're doing work that a human would have to do if they weren't there. So my favorite one is Perry, and it's a podcast agent. So, after you record a podcast, you've got a transcript, and Perry takes that transcript and creates the blog post and puts it in Webflow. the website provider. It creates draft social posts. It creates the show notes, the description, gives you
Yeah.
10 ideas for naming it. It'll clip segments for what would be good YouTube shorts. It'll create quote graphics based on the good quotes from there. And so the whole thing takes a couple of minutes for it to run through. And it's the AI agent is trained on each one of those things based on what you've done in the past.
That is a
So it
great
has
one,
that
by the way.
context to work from.
That
What's
is a
that?
great one. I wish
Yeah,
I
that
wish
one's my favorite.
is his name Perry?
Yeah, Perry.
I wish Perry was a friend of mine. That's actually a really good one. I kind of do the same thing, but I don't have it as an AI agent. I instruct it to do those things. Although I have not submitted transcripts of it to it
Yeah.
to do the identify the reels and the shorts and the
Mhm.
quotable moments and things like that. That's actually a really good idea. I'm on the board of directors for one of our trade organizations, and we have an AI agent, and we named it Max. And
Yeah, I
same
love
thing,
that.
Max, Ask Max. And because we're in the electronics manufacturing industry, we have, as part of our trade organization, we have thousands, like 6,000 plus white papers and technical articles,
Mm.
transcriptions from webinars, trainings, very, very, very technical. In fact, our library is so large that before Max, someone would search a keyword and they'd get 417 search results with links to
Oh,
the papers.
yeah.
Now, Max was trained only on our content, which is vast.
Ah,
We've been around
yeah.
for 31 years, serving the industry
Yeah.
for over 31 years, or no, 40 years. And so we've got a lot of content that is
Mhm.
peer reviewed, documented, published. So now Max will, because it's been trained on 6 or 7 thousand technical papers and a bunch of other stuff, ask it a very technical, manufacturing oriented, engineering oriented question. It will not only give you the answer, it'll give you links to the best data that they can
Mhm.
actually download themselves. And this is a free service for all of our members, but it's probably one of the most popular of
Mhm.
the offerings that we have is an
Yeah.
AI agent. And it took several months to feed it everything because we had to
Mhm.
find where everything was and we had to make sure that it was readable and we had to
Mhm.
transcribe all the technical webinars so that because it's not watching webinars yet. I think it's still looking at
Mhm.
transcripts. So we had to
Mhm.
transcribe
Mhm.
them all. So that took several months, but oh my gosh, it's so popular, and it's not just a novelty. It is way useful because you can go on ChatGPT or any of the other AI sources and you can search the same information, but it's going to give you a much broader view. And most of our material is behind a paywall, it's for members.
Yeah.
So it probably wouldn't even cite it because it can't see it because it's behind a
Mhm.
paywall. So
Mhm. Mhm.
it's really good. At first, when we approved it as a board, I thought, well, this is kind of gimmicky, but yeah, sure, why not? I think it shocked everybody how powerful it is and how valuable
Yeah.
to our members it really is.
That example is so good, and we actually have, so it's probably in what's called a RAG database. I would not be surprised if that's how the AI agent is accessing all that information. And so what a RAG does is that it creates your database so that whenever you write a question to it, it can go and quickly run through all of those hundreds and thousands of large documents and transcripts and things. And so that is one of the other most popular AI agents that we do, because you do for client support things, like you're saying, like where you've got all these technical documents and you need to grab the thing fast, the answer fast, is this is a really common pain point with organizations. So instead of having AI give you a general response, it can instead tap into your content or your database. And this was such a common one that we were building for clients that we now have a 4-week training course that people can do where they can come and get trained on how to build an AI agent with a RAG database.
Wow. Wow. And all this technology that's out there that's wasn't out there 5 years ago, or 2 years
I
ago,
know.
1 year ago. I'm sure some tech
Yeah.
just introduced today since we've started talking. You talk a lot about turning chaos into clarity through automation. What are the most common signs that a business has outgrown its current systems?
Yeah.
What are the warning
If
signs?
you, yeah, warning signs have that we used to always hear this from the owner. I just want things to work like they used to when they were small, because that owner or that manager is just getting bogged down with questions. How do we do this? Where do I go to find this? How do I answer this client question? Man, that means you don't have a process. That they don't know where the status of where work is. So they're using Slack or Teams a lot. A lot of conversations around client work or support or happening within Slack and Teams, and then trying to go back and find that answer. And then the last thing is we don't have any accountability. I don't know accountability or capacity. I don't know which of my employees are overworked or underworked. All I know is maybe a timesheet if we're even filling out timesheets. And so doing any type of capacity planning is non-existent because they don't know where the work is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good tell right there. Your company, first of all, I love the name of the company, Biggest Goal. That's an awesome name.
Thank you.
Biggest Goal focuses on automation, on automating complex workflows and helping companies operate more efficiently. What kinds of tasks should entrepreneurs stop doing manually, like right now?
So, I mean, gosh, anything with data movement, like if you think about your day, it is okay. I just got off this call and now I've got to tell my team what to do. I've got to fill out this client brief or this support ticket or whatever it is. And we're just moving data from a CRM from the into a, I was going to say PandaDoc, but that's the software, into a proposal software, and then moving that to our project management system or sending an email to our team. Like all of that is just data movement. That eliminates that little piece that I just said could eliminate 2 hours of work.
Wow.
Perry, because I knew how much time a human was using, even with ChatGPT, even with them using AI for each piece. Once we put Perry in place, that took away 30 hours of manual work a week
Wow.
because we didn't have to reprompt every single time. Like all of that was already written into the AI agent. And so anything with data movement is the easiest for an agent because you already know the process. You already know it needs to go from Pipedrive to PandaDoc to QuickBooks Online when it's one. So, okay, well, we already know this process. We don't need to retell the data. We already have that data. So that's an easy one to implement.
So you spend time sitting on the other side of the podcast desk. You host a podcast, automate
Mhm.
your agency, and it focuses on helping business owners create, it helps them scale
Mhm.
without being trapped in the day-to-day grind of growing and scaling a company. What does a business owner need to believe before they can finally let go of some control?
Oh, that's a really good question. They've got to let go of their ego and their fear of no longer being relevant in their business. That is
Mm.
actually the fear of being irrelevant is it's tied to ego, but it's bigger than that because they don't, if they've been so ingrained in the day to day, you start your business and you're doing everything. Well, you have a fear of letting go because what am I going to, if I'm not doing this, what am I going to do? You've been in this grind for so long that they cannot, so they've got to understand, hey, I can find a new purpose in this business. I can do something of value. They're so worried of what is going to be valuable. What is my team going to think of what I'm putting into this company? And so they've got to figure out what their value is and be able to let go of the things that don't bring them value.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of the word value, your marketing approach, I'm guessing this is a marketing approach, I might be wrong, but is all about creating value rather than 500 call to actions. Buy from me, buy from me,
Mhm.
buy from me. We're best. We're this. We're the biggest. Whatever. And I think your podcast is one prime example of providing value. Automate your agency. What's the reason you started that podcast? And is that part of your value creation strategy? Is that, like a conscious marketing strategy, or was it more organic than that?
One of the things that I really got frustrated with, so one of the things that I have to really be careful of in my own personal thought process is that I'm not a victim, because I will default to that without paying attention that, so I remember in my other business that there was an automotive magazine, and they featured one of our competitors, and the article was just garbage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we are so much better than them, and we would have answered this so differently. And I had the victim mentality, why didn't they come to us? What I realized is they had no idea who we were. They went to who had been conversating with them, and that when they needed an article on social media for car dealerships, that they went to them. And so part of the podcast was, at the end of the day, if we want to be known as something, people have to know about us.
Mm-hmm.
And in the most organic, innocent way, like, I'm not trying to sell anything, but if you need AI support or a speaker for something, man, you got to know who I am to even put me on the list. And I had a really big wake up call. I don't even think I'd started the podcast yet. I had submitted. I'm part of this organization called 10,000 Small Businesses. It's by Goldman Sachs. It's a business program that they do. And they had sent a call out to all the alumni of the program saying, hey, do we have any AI experts? This was so early on. This was 2022, I think, or 2021, 2022. Do we have any AI
which at
experts?
At the speed of AI, that's like 100 years ago, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they sent that out, and I saw it, and because they needed some of the alumni for an AI panel that they wanted to do with some of the Goldman Sachs executives. So I submitted to it and said yes, and they vetted me. They did a whole interview process, and I was one selected. And from that experience, there was a whole trickle of amazing things that happened, that the people that were on there were part of these boards that said, hey, does anybody know an AI speaker? We need one for this conference, and we know nobody, because this is so far and ahead of where most people are at. And I got multiple speaking engagements just from that free, me sitting on this panel, me giving away my expertise. And I was in the chat of that webinar, like messaging people with their questions, and people were connecting with me on LinkedIn. And I just thought, man, how can I do more of this? And it goes back to, people have to know that you exist and that you have some kind of knowledge on this. And so one day I walked into my office, and I was almost like mad. I was like, Micah, we are starting a podcast, and if you don't want to do it, I'm doing it without you. Like, I was just so focused on, this is how we can get more people, we can help more people, that people can know who we are. So if they ever need an expert on something, at least we're in the running because they know our names.
Yeah.
And so that's how that started. And the more that we realized, giving away stuff doesn't take away anything from what you do.
It builds
it
authority.
Only adds value.
Yeah. It builds authority when you provide value in your space. And then when you build authority in your space, you become a word that I hate now because it's been hijacked by other people, but you become an influencer, but not a TikTok, Torquay, Kardashian influencer.
Right.
All love to Kim, but not that type of influencer, but an authority-based influencer. And, look at how younger people, you become your father when you start a sentence with young people these days, but I'll go there. Young people these days learn differently than I learned. I learned, I was 36 when the internet came out, right? So, most of my learning was through, newspaper articles or books or encyclopedias and, library trips to the library. It was not online. Today, we can say kids these days, there's my dad talking, kids these days always have their faces and screens, which may be true, but it's not all Instagram and TikTok and, whatever. A lot of it is they search for answers online. They look for influencers, for better or for worse. They look for people, they look at unboxing reviews on YouTube and other sources. They search their own information. And then as a result, my generation didn't do this, but as a result, the younger generation, they don't just buy products, they join tribes. Look at Apple, particularly in its early days. People will camp out for 5 days in front of a store to be the first 100 customers to get the next generation of iPhone, which is marginally better than the last generation. And Nike, who runs huge marketing campaigns that most of the time don't even show their shoe or at least talk about their shoe. They celebrate athleticism. People join tribes now, and they do it because they've got an emotional connection with the marketing campaign or the spokesperson or the person on YouTube, the subject matter expert, and they trust them. And I think when you do podcasts like that, I do a similar podcast on in my tech world, my professional job, where I talk about everything except my company. We talk about reliability of electronics. Well, turns out that's the space I'm in. But our customers are smart. They can draw the line. They trust me to be a non-commercial, non-biased, totally agnostic voice for my industry. And I bring in lots of subject matter experts and give them a platform to talk about that as long as it's non-commercial. And so I built that reputation. And, at first, some of my team would go, "You're just giving away too much." And now they're like, "Do more," because we haven't run a paid ad in our trades in 10 years. Instead, we create content, we create value, and then we create authority, and then we become an influencer. And I love what you're doing because you get that. And not a lot of business owners get that, right? They're just saying, how can we advertise more? How can we be louder? How can we create more noise? What shtick can we put out there? What trade shows can we get a booth in? What swag should we give away? And that just doesn't work It might work on my generation. It doesn't work on the generation of people who are now influencers in their company on who they're going to pick, right? So I think that's a really savvy move. I say move because that diminishes its value, but it's a very savvy strategy. It's a better way to put it.
It's a lot more fun, I'll say too. Hey, try this out. It's free. Come be part. And when I go, I am not famous by any means at all, but
I know what you're going to say.
When I go to an event,
they know
especially a part of that Goldman Sachs program, there's a lot of those alumni that have listened to our podcast, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're Alane Boyd. I get to see you in person." There's
I know, right?
fulfilling
In our tiny little orbit, we're little tiny celebrities.
Yes.
The first time that happened to me, this was several years ago. I was in an elevator. I was speaking at a conference, and I was in an elevator and going up whatever floor. And a woman was in the elevator, and she did this. To my listening audience, I'm pointing at Alane, and then she had this I kind of know you face, who are you? And she goes, "Are you?" And I just went, "Yeah." I'm sure she meant Tom Selleck, but or George Clooney or somebody. But I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Yeah, that podcast guy." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I love your podcast." I went, "You just made my day," and that was probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm still telling the story, right? But you're right. It is a very strange feeling when all of a sudden more people know you than you know them. Because before it was equal, it was 50-50. If I knew you, you knew who I was. And now it's quite the opposite. And it's just the power of providing valuable, tangible value that they can take and make their lives better, their business life, their reliability life, whatever life, workflow life, all of that. One last question, because we're about out of time. Way back in the day, when you first began, you were a very young entrepreneur. So when you first began your first entrepreneurial journey, how did you define success, and how do you define it now?
Oh, gosh. I remember It was right before my 30th birthday, and I was 29, and I was with my best friend. Her and I went to we're high school best friends, and I'm in her car, and she was like, asked me something about my birthday, and I was like, I am pretty upset because I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And she was just like, oh, Alane, I think that's like a terrible way to
Such a slacker,
judge
Alane. You're
yourself.
such a slacker.
I know. And she's like, you've got this amazing company that you're building. Like maybe you'll be 31 instead of
Right?
30. And, but I was so mad that I wasn't more successful, with it wasn't that my company wasn't worth millions. My personal worth wasn't millions yet. And I'm like, man, that was like such a immature way to think about things because I was building something incredible. My friend on the outside was like, Alane, you're building something incredible. You're growing this amazing team of people. And now looking back, I was like, man, I couldn't have gotten there that fast with the knowledge that I had going in, right? Like
Yeah.
I needed to be in different rooms and I just had to learn how to be where I wanted to go. So, I think that was one of my biggest, like how I measured success was always financially because that was my goal in life was
Sure.
to be wealthy, to have a great life. And I couldn't separate not being a millionaire yet from the financial success I was already having. Like it was non-existent to me. Like if I'm not that,
Wow.
I'm nothing.
Wow. Wow. That's a hard goal. And how about today? How do you define success now?
Man, having the time, like, hush, I've got a 10-year-old son and I'm there for everything. I can say no to anything now.
Like your
No, I
father
don't want
was
to do
like
that.
your father was there for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my God, Mike, that makes me want to cry. Yeah, that's exactly right. That I have built something. Whew, I gotta take a deep breath because that is absolutely right. I'm there for everything. Everything that I need to be, I'm there for. And I have the audacity to say no, the courage to say no, and to show up where I want to show up.
That is success.
Yeah, that really is.
100%. That's success. And,
Thank you.
history tends to repeat generationally. So in your case, you are if I'm doing this show 20 years from now, I'll talk to your 30-year-old son and he'll say, my mom was always there for me.
Yeah.
And she was an entrepreneur. So I want to be an entrepreneur so I could be there for my kids. History repeats. So good for your dad. Kudos. Is your dad still around?
He is. He's about to be 90.
Wow.
He's got progressed dementia now, but we get to do a lot with him. And, there's still parts of him there. He still says all of his silly jokes that he says. And
Dad jokes
so
are the last thing to go, I think.
they really
My
are. I'm
family's
like,
already cringing at that, so they're already worried about that. Because I'm just kind of, me and your dad are probably both dad joke kings, right? And all dads are at some point. But
all dads are, I think. Yeah.
yeah, all dads are. It goes with the territory. Well, Alane Boyd, thank you so much for being my guest today. And continued success. I don't need to say good luck because you've already proven that you don't need that. This is the next journey. And don't judge yourself harshly if you're not a billionaire yet. That will come. But you've already passed the million mark. But continued success to you, particularly with Biggest Goal. And keep writing those workflow things and keep helping businesses get more done and more productive and then more profitable. That's what you do. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for the generosity of your time and telling your entrepreneurial journey, sharing that with me and my audience, the grittiness of it, the success of it, the highs, the lows, and thanks for sharing some best practice advice on our friend Harry and all the other names that you've given it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I know my audience will find this very valuable and inspirational.
Awesome, Mike. You rock. I had so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. You rock as well. We're mutual admiration society here. So thanks, Alane. Okay, here are some final thoughts. Alane's story is a great reminder that entrepreneurship is not just about building something valuable. It's also about building something sustainable, not only for the customer, not only for the market, but for the person running the company. It's easy to believe the goal is growth. Then maybe the goal becomes an exit. Then maybe the goal becomes freedom. But Alane's story shows that freedom doesn't automatically arrive just because the transaction closes or the calendar clears. The real reason may be this: a business that depends entirely on you can become a very expensive job. But a business built with systems, clarity, automation, and intention can give you something much more valuable than growth alone. It can give you room to think, room to lead, and maybe even room to enjoy the life you were supposed to be building the business to create. Now, that is a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, of course, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest or just learn more about the show. And don't forget to check out my newest series, Reluctant Lessons, When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and the story behind it all. We've already profiled several companies with many more on the way. As it turns out, there's no shortage. Check out Reluctant Lessons on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon, and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. That's it for me. I'm out of time. Thanks so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you, and I'll see you again soon.